Hello and welcome to this course on change management for Durham staff. My name is Steve Prentice and I'm delighted to be here working with you on this important element of your professional future. Change management is something that we need on a daily basis, and this course will cover all the basics that you need to know about to handle it, either as somebody who is implementing change in a department or team, or somebody who is experiencing change, as we all are. This session is a collection of 6 segments, each of them roughly between 25 minutes and 30 minutes. So manageable amounts to watch on video at regular speed, or if you're up to it, double speed. But these are going to cover some key elements for each of these segments. My background, I've been working with Durham for a number of years, teaching courses all around the area that my specialty is in, which is in organizational psychology, specifically in that juncture where people and technology and work crash into each other. So we've been dealing with a lot of things over the last few years and a lot of amazing change even in the last few months. It can be very difficult to handle. This course will give you everything you need to know to understand why it's so difficult, how to handle it better, and even how to make change work. This is a precursor to the course we deliver on change management for Durham staff and also change management for leaders. And also is a precursor to a special course that's also available on video called Organizational Change Management. Yes, there is such a thing. So that's the whole collection. But we start here on episode 1 or segment 1, where we talk about change and fear. And believe me, we all deal with this. It's just a great way to get to know how it works, why it happens the way it does, and what we can do about it. So let's jump right in. Going through our segments today, this is going to be PowerPoint based, obviously, like most of the stuff we do. I'm going to move myself over here, get out of the way of the material there, and focus on a few key points here that we see in our lives. We see these things happening around us. There's all kinds of changes in the workplace that we experience as team members, as leaders, but also going home to our homes, our families, and so on, managing these kinds of things. What are we seeing these days? Well, as you have experienced, we've all been through an enormous period of change over the last few years with the pandemic, with the lockdown, and with the modifications to the way in which we do our work. More and more now, we are meeting on Zoom and Teams and other kinds of video chat technologies to some degree of success and also to some degree of frustration. We are seeing, as a consequence of that, people who have differing opinions as to where, when, and how they wish to work. We don't have the standard 9 to 5 concept now, as people are seeing that there are other opportunities to work together, even if they are in different physical locations. The whole hybrid concept, it's inevitable that this is going to become a major part of our working environment from now on. This leads to changes in the way we do things. So a reduction in our face-to-face time, or at least that's how it appears. I can tell you that there are much better ways to have face-to-face conversations than doing it through Zoom specifically, which is really not a hugely interactive technology, even when you are sitting there looking at me through your camera. There are better technologies already there. So the session's not here to talk about those technologies specifically, but the fact that they exist and the fact that they are changing the way we do work is important. So we are seeing this reduction in face-to-face time, or at least in the working environment of the workplace, whether you work on a computer or if your work takes you elsewhere to more physical environments, working with more physical tools. We are changing our relationships of how we interact with others. So much was done face to face. We also see constant changes in policy and procedure in the workplace. This is inevitable. This always happens. I mean, things just simply do change in the workplace. So we have to deal with anticipated changes. Job layoffs, of course, is one of the biggest concerns people will always have, but also merging departments, just changing the mandates, changing the way things are done, changing the locations, once again, that they are occurring in. There's numerous ways that the department can change the policy by which it operates, and also then the mechanics of how it operates, the procedures. We are seeing in real time a shift from desks, cubicles, and offices through to hoteling or hot desking or free address systems, however you wish to call it, in which the times that people do come into the office from their home-based environment, they now are looking up to reserving a desk for the day. How does this work for you? How well has it been received by your team? This is a significant cultural policy and procedure change, which has seen great success in organizations that have taken it on. But at the same time, there's a great deal of pushback, resistance, and grief for losing what has passed beyond. This is, the word grief is not incorrect to use here. And that's one of our central points in today's session, or in these sessions, is that change is very similar to the activity of grief that we are all forced to experience at some times when really important things change in our lives. The passing of a loved one, for example, moving house, changing towns. There's so many areas like that we actually do grieve the loss of what has passed. And that's why we're here to talk about these things today, because that's the kind of stuff that we need to know about in order to understand how to start a new change. You can't just simply say, hey, everybody, as of next Monday, we're going to all have this hot desking system. You just go onto this really cool app and book your desk for the day. It works really well. That's not enough. We have to recognize how people experience an impact to their lives and the emotional stability that we rely on. We rely on consistency to remain emotionally stable. So when things change, of course, it's going to rock the boat, and we've got to handle that. You might find at the workplace that there are changes to policies with regards to efficiency and efficacy, how work is done. There's lots of problems, and a lot of work that I spend my time on consulting to organizations is on how to manage, as a manager or as a leader, a team that you can no longer see. There are interesting observations and discoveries that come about because the dynamic between managers and people who do the work of the department has substantially changed and puts into substantial question what each side actually does and how we can understand that better. So changes to the way in which we define work and understand work is another example of what's going on in these days right now. We've got new technologies and software applications to learn. This has always been the case even before teleworking or work from home became a thing, just dealing with new technologies. We've got social media applications like TikTok and Instagram changing the way people spend their leisure time, as well as how they get their information about the world. Not necessarily good, because these are unfiltered channels that don't necessarily deliver the kind of information that people need to understand. But there's no question that society has changed over the last 5 or 10 years to not only a greater focus on individualized media, but consequently a greater expectation of individualized treatment, much more so than in previous decades. Okay, we've gone from, let's say, a workplace with a workforce to individuals working with their own individual expectations of what they specifically need from their manager, from their company, and from their life. So there's some enormous societal changes happening all around us, and we are all involved in it. And this, of course, moves not only from working from home, but also therefore into things like work-life balance or work-life integration, how we bring our working lives and our home lives together in ways that weren't done before. There are other situations, such as rumors of economic change. Again, the fears of the change to the stability of the working environment, such as, let's say, an election coming up. Every time an election comes up, usually the people in charge will make some changes to the way in which the system is run. This, again, might mean threatening projects or jobs that you're working on right now. And this is a cause for fear. There's no question about it. These things cause fear. So These are just a small, this is just a small collection of the examples of changes happening in the workplace right around us at this very moment. But what does that do for humans? What does that do for us as individual people? Well, what it can lead to is rather a large collection of different responses, different feelings and emotions that you may have. You may have all of these, some of these, or these at different times. Going from the right-hand side, some people will leap into a new thing with great enthusiasm, great interest in this new technique, this new technology, this new approach, this new job or work assignment. So for some people, this becomes a great opportunity for something new to explore. Some people's personalities align with that. Let's go and try this new thing out. Others, just a little bit more to the left towards caution, may look at this with curiosity. I'm not so sure about using work from home technology or using generative AI as part of my work. I'm interested, but I just don't know yet. Please tell me more. And again, moving further back from this, I mean, intrigue is just the sort of the precursor to curiosity. I've heard about it. I'm intrigued by this, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem right. It just doesn't seem normal to the way we do things. But then as you move further to the left on this, you get into the more negative approaches or responses or reactions to change. A feeling that you are alone in this, that you are the only person who seems to have problems with this. Everyone else seems to be doing fine, but I just don't get it. I don't know, and I wish we could go back to the way things were. I feel totally alone and isolated. Further to the left of that, you'll see grief. Again, as I mentioned before, this concern about change becomes now an overwhelming sense of loss, losing what I was used to and missing that. And I miss what I was used to. So grief is a very profound response, which we'll get into in detail in these segments, because understanding this eminently expectable sequence of responses is key to being able to manage change, either as a leader or someone who is implementing change, or as a staff member or anybody else who is experiencing the change being placed upon them. Further to the left of this, and now we get into the much more negative responses: doubt, doubt that this will work, doubt that it's worth doing, doubt of one's own individual abilities to take it on and do it. Many people I work with day to day express their own doubts about being able to use technologies like Zoom or Teams, or the new ones that are already here that are better than Zoom and Teams for interaction and workplace involvements. I mentioned brands such as Toucan, Toucan .events, and Virbela, Virbela, that are both virtual environments in which we can work, and I think they work great. But the issue here is, well, I don't know that I can use this. I don't know that that I come across right for this. I just don't know about myself and about the technologies. This moves even further to the left in terms of now fear. Fear is one of the probably the most profound influence that we all have as human beings. We are ruled by fear. And just to step back for a second here, we as human beings have two sides inside of us: an emotional side and a rational side. And emotion always wins every argument. No matter how rational you may consider yourself to be, the point is that every decision we make in life is based on emotion first and logic second. So large life purchases like buying a house or a car, down to small things like choosing what to have for dinner, all is based on how you feel, with some degree of logical support following it. This makes sense. If it's a house, it's a good neighborhood, the taxes are good, the mortgage rate is good. You'll justify your decision using facts, but decisions are always made by emotion, and the strongest emotion of all is fear. Now, this makes sense if you think about it, because fear is intended to be the technique that helps prevent you from getting into danger, into physical danger leading to death. It's an instinctive self-preservation response to naturally fear anything that is new and unknown, because there lies potential danger. This is the root of everything that we do. And I wrote a book on this last year called The Future of Workplace Fear, because I think that there's so much that can impact one's ability to implement change in the workplace when fear takes over and stops people from doing things. So absolutely, this is something we have to factor into everything, is understanding that you, me, everyone else is ruled by emotion. And the number one emotion that dominates everything we do is fear. The sort of the initial underlying question is always, what is this new thing going to do to me? Not what is it going to do for me as a great new thing, but what is it going to do to me? And that concern is what people have to deal with. And that's the filter through which everything that we handle in our day-to-day environment that is just loaded with change everywhere, that's how we handle it. And of course, at the far side of this is where people give up. A sense of learned helplessness or hopelessness, which can lead to passive resignation. I'll just do it, I don't care anymore, or total resistance, but a sense that there is no hope. And of course, we want to avoid people falling into that particular place, because that's a hard one to get out of. We've all been there in some regard for some areas of our lives. It's very difficult to be there and to come out of it. So obviously, we want to try to avoid anything that is going to lead to that sense of hopelessness amongst the people around us. So, as you're watching this, you may not be the person in charge of the change being deployed. But it doesn't mean you cannot remain aware of this spectrum of responses and how it might impact yourself and others around you, and therefore what can we do about that? We're going to cover that today, of course, but the good news is we have the capacity to handle these things. Even the worst of the negative experiences, we can handle them. We can work through these things, but it takes, as the reason for this course, it takes some understanding of what to do. So here we are, in this course, in the segments that you will be observing here in sequence here, we're going to be talking about a few things. So how to handle the uncertainty and fear of change, how to accept it and or cope with it better, right? I mean, we can accept things we cannot change, or we can cope with those things, but we can also start to work with them and embrace them and make them part of our lives in a much more positive and engaging and just simply active way. How to plan and prepare better for change. One other interesting part on the sort of other side of this is change fatigue. So many things are changing that people become complacent, or worse, just simply ignore the new things. One of the examples I always like to use in this regard is in cybersecurity, password security, something that I do a lot of work in consulting to organizations and helping them with with understanding the psychology of change as it comes around to asking employees to change their passwords every 2 weeks. I mean, we've all been through that. How boring, how frustrating is that? You're trying to get something done, and a little note comes up saying you got to change your password. It breaks the momentum. It breaks that sense of what I was here to do. It's a real drag. But unfortunately, you got to do it, and you got to keep doing it until passwords are replaced by something better, and you will still have to keep maintaining ongoing levels of security with regards to your technologies that you use, because the bad threat actors are always trying to get in. But this is a really great example of change fatigue. People are tired of having to do this every couple of weeks. And I can tell you, and you may be one of these people, but you may not be, so often certain employees will change their password while IT is watching them do it, and will change it back to what it was as soon as they're not being watched anymore, which is going beyond change fatigue into this area of almost soft sabotage of the objectives of this change. Ultimately, it's a failure of the change initiative if people actually change their password back to what it was, because the change didn't stick, right? And this is part of the problem, is that people are tired of this. And if the change doesn't stick, then the change isn't working. So we've got to understand that it's not just simply having people understand the intellectual reason for making this change. We now have to also ensure that this is embraced, reinforced, rewarded perhaps, but maintained so that the passwords or any other kind of change stays. Human beings are very good in going back to some sort of particular way of doing things that is easier and normal. And changes that are not natural, are just not easy to embrace, will just slide away once again. We want to also look at negativity in others. Negativity as an emotion is contagious. It's interesting to observe the contagion of all kinds of emotions. Negativity and panic and fear are contagious. If one person has them, other people also can feel it and magnify it within themselves. But the good news is calm, happiness, and joy are also contagious. It is possible, the same way that people can pick up on somebody's fear and panic, you can also pick up on people's sense of calm and comfort. And great leaders can do this either innately, instinctively, or can learn this skill. And you may observe this, as a leader yourself, or as someone who is following a particular leader at this point. How well are they being able to deliver this contagious sense of comfort and the fact that everything is okay, and even enthusiasm, especially in the face of change and its innate instant response of negativity and fear and distrust. We also want to be able to gain buy-in and cooperation from team members and colleagues. So part of the objective of this course, not only to understand the sense of change and fear and responses in your own self, but of course, how we can work as a team to build upon the changes, to develop that buy-in and establish a culture not only of a new habit, but also of ongoing acceptance of change. So lots of things to look at in our course today. Throughout the segments that we have. But one of the standards, of course, is that change happens. There's no question about the fact that change happens, and we need to recognize this rather than worrying that, is this the last change that we're ever going to have to deal with? Is this done now? Can I relax? No, change continues to happen. What used to be just simply an office full of people working around a table is now going to be an office with people dialing in from outside using some kind of interactive video chat technology. What we used as in the background of this image here, the whiteboard or the easel with lots of ideas and stuff on it, great idea, still really good, but you can also do the same thing online using, as you can see in the second screen here, some kind of online work environment, a virtual whiteboard, a virtual mural that you can do your brainstorming and ideas from. Same benefits, different technologies, different approaches. Change will continue to happen. It will be the constant, as the old cliche says. It's the only constant is change. So we need to understand how to not only deal with the changes we're facing right now, but also the fact that they will continue, and how are we going to make that happen. So before we get into the mechanics of how your brain responds here, let's look at some of the simplest definitions of change. And these are, as you can see up here, that a change is not only when something new starts, it is also when something stops. And that's an important thing to remember, is that something has ended, some procedure, some lifestyle has ended, and in its place is a new thing that we have to get used to. But moving through that transition, again, is going to be key to understanding successful change. We have to learn new skills. One of the things about learning new skills is that as you are learning something, you are inevitably going to make some mistakes. Sure, you're learning new skills. You are practicing something you haven't done before. And any student learning anything is going to get things wrong until they inevitably get things more and more right. That's what learning is. But there's a great fear that people have, again, of looking stupid, looking incompetent when they're trying to learn a new technique. So whether it's how to be on Zoom, or how to use a password management software, or how to learn a new application, or how to learn just a new skill anywhere within the workplace, the fear of making a mistake is always going to dominate and impact people's ability to focus, concentrate, and learn. This gets more difficult with age generally. As people get older, not only do they get more worried about this kind of exposure to their perceived incompetence, which is not what it is, but that's what they feel it to be, but also a resistance to wanting to do it in the first place. I just don't want to do it this new way. I like the old way. And this means that very often when change initiatives are delivered into an organization, there is a very high failure rate. People will go back to the way things were. It's called recidivism, just going back to how things were in the past because I just liked it that way. And I can tell you, from my own direct professional perspective, one of the things I've been teaching for 30 years now is time management, how to manage time in the context of all the tasks and priorities and interruptions that we all have. I wrote a book on this and I've been teaching it successfully for all this time because it's one of the most challenging problems that people face. But I can tell you that even after taking my course or anybody else's course for that matter on new best practices, changing the way you do things, changing your habits to be more balanced and efficient in the way that you manage your tasks in time, it's very difficult for that to stick unless it is practiced regularly, at least for a couple of months. People slide back to the way they used to do things because that's human nature. So it's really important when we are looking to integrate change into our environments to recognize that it's not just simply a new thing, but it's the ending of the old thing. That B, there's a learning curve required that people are going to have fears about, as well as the challenges of actually learning, and C, that the odds are actually stacked against successful deployment of this because there's so much that people naturally want to fall back to the way things were. So in this next segment coming up, we are going to have a look at the mental structure of the brain and what is actually wrong with change itself. So stick with me here and we'll be right back to have a look at the next part, which is going to be exactly on this, the mechanics of your mind and those of everyone around you as to why and how change is so difficult. And of course, what we can do about it.